Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Peaceful Growth Podcast. I have a very interesting and special guest today, Brian from WPSessions. A lot of you probably have heard about WordSesh or WooSesh events and have joined it, or maybe you might also have been a speaker in this event. So Brian is a brain behind this event. He's an event producer, and he's not just an event producer, he's a lot of other things, and which I'll let him come and jump in and share a little bit more about it. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, Anil, it is wonderful to be here. Thank you for that introduction. I'm glad to be participating.
I'm glad to have you here. In fact, I was one of the speaker in one of the WordSesh event. Was it 2022?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So I've actually spoken to a handful of events, but it was very different and unique experience when I decided to speak at WordSesh. The reason it was unique and different because you put together so much efforts and resources so that I become more successful with my talk. And I haven't seen in the past to any events where I go, the host or organizer would actually put in the efforts in order to make sure that I have all the resources, knowledge to present my talk in a best way. And most importantly, it was not just your time, but you also put together a lot of great tips. And I still, even after the talk, I still use some of those tips in my talks and my communication. And so that was kind of like what also was very different about it, and one reason why I wanted you to come on the show, so we can talk a little bit more about some of the tips and the learnings and the advice that you have for anyone who is either struggling or interested in the area of just communication, like how to make it basically be more presentable and present your thoughts, present your idea, and present yourself, into different social or business events and setup. So we'll come back to that. But before we actually go into the topic, do you mind maybe telling a little bit more about who you are? What else do you do apart from the events?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really smart place to start. One problem that has plagued me through my entire career is that I don't really fit into any particular box. Like my skills don't represent themselves very well in a resume or any sort of traditional setting, because I am a jack of all trades or a Renaissance man. Like I do a lot of different things and I enjoy them. And one quirk about me is that I only want to do things that I can do well. And so I practice them until I do them really well. So before I got into event production and running training through WPSessions, I was working in the agency life, building websites for high profile and not so high profile clients alike. And before I was doing that, I was an independent contractor and consultant. And one thing I think that has made me succeed across all of these is I love seeing the entire picture. So I'll build out this whole sort of idea in my head of what is needed to solve a particular problem. And that has helped me sell six-figure contracts. It helps me be a manager and a team leader for all the times that I was that, because I can see the context, not just of what this one problem needs, but like all of the problems along the way of making sure like my team members' needs are met, or the client's needs are met, or the client's customers' needs are met. And then I do my best to communicate each of those things effectively so that everybody involved in whatever I happen to be working on can understand that their needs are going to be met. And that, in my experience, has led to outsized returns and amazing conversations and amazing ongoing opportunities beyond the ones that I just happen to fall into, which is a lot of fun. So that was a very long answer and story-filled way of saying I've done development work, design work, video production, speaker management, sponsor management, fundraising, contract writing, proposal writing, team leading, and so on.
Amazing. So how did you end up with the WordSesh and WPSessions? Tell us a little bit about the journey there.
Oh yeah. So I started WPSessions 11 years ago, or it will be 11 years here in Memorial Weekend, 2024. And that started when I was doing some agency work in a developer capacity and realized there was some basic stuff with like database interactions that I didn't know how to do. And I was mad at the time that I'd made it maybe 10 or 12 years into my career and I hadn't done this basic stuff. I'm like, how did I miss this? And then I asked my coworkers and they didn't know the answer either. I'm like, well, this is stupid. Let me see if I can find someone who knows databases and I can pay them for an hour of their time to just entertain us and answer the questions we have.
Yeah.
And I thought about it for another hour. I'm like, if I could sell tickets to this, we could pay them for more than an hour of their time. They could earn some money. Maybe I could even earn some money for organizing it. And then WPSessions was born. I'm like, maybe I can find a bunch of experts to talk about a variety of topics. And indeed, I was correct, and that proved to be rather successful and enjoyable for everybody. And right around the same time, actually, about 6 or 8 months prior to that, my buddy Scott Bosgard put together WordSesh as a virtual conference for people in the WordPress community that was 24 hours long, so we could hit everybody in every time zone. And I helped him run that off and on for 4 different events. And then after he got burnt out on that, there were a few years that it didn't happen. I said, hey, I would like to get back into doing a virtual conference. I don't want to do it if WordSesh is happening. I would prefer that it's WordSesh. Do you want to do it again? Do you want help? Do you want to like pass the torch? And he gave it all to me to run independently. And so this will be the 8th year that I've been running it solo. And from that, I birthed, along with Patrick Rolland in the beginning, WooSesh. So the same exact virtual conference concept, but for WooCommerce. And I've been doing that for 7 years. And really, it all just burst out of me wanting to learn things and then me wanting to go to every possible WordCamp and realizing that's financially irresponsible, if not impossible. And like, what if I just got all of these speakers together virtually and then I could learn from them without going anywhere? And here we are many years later, and it's been a real blast.
Yeah. No, I also love the virtual format especially for the learning, because I see when you go to WordCamp or events or conferences, there are 2 different goals or objectives, right? The one is where you are there to learn and from someone or something, or you are there to connect in the sense like you're trying to just meet new people, and try to connect on more like a business level. So learning part of the event, I personally have felt that it is much more effective when it's virtual, because then the session are being recorded. You can also watch it, skip the part that you're not interested in. Even if it's a live event, I feel like it gives you much more attention and focus to learn it. And I think it's one of the effective way of learning for myself. And what you mentioned about in some of the actual events like WordCamp, a lot of people, because of the visa requirements, and they are in the countries where traveling and all of that can be more expensive. So this becomes actually much more inclusive for a lot of different types of people, and makes the learning more accessible.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And also why I take extra steps to make sure that every talk is transcribed and professionally edited, so that, especially for people where English is a second language,
right,
or people who, like me, need a little extra thing to focus on to pay attention, those captions are paramount for making sure that all the right information is accessible to everybody. Yeah, I love that. And to your point about physical events having multiple goals, you're exactly right. In fact, when I go to physical events, I'm mostly there to get to know other people. Most of the opportunities I've had have birthed from conversations that I've had at physical events, and it's a completely different experience to a virtual event. I've tried to foster those in my virtual events, but they don't work in the same way. It's because most of the opportunities are organic. Like I don't even know that they exist, but through just a casual conversation that I'm having over dinner or, in the hallway track at these physical events, interesting things happen. And I don't think you can produce that kind of serendipity in a virtual event. Try as I might. I want to, I really want to, but nothing quite works the same way.
Great. So Brian, let's talk about some of your learnings and tips that can be helpful to someone who is interested in just leveling up their game on communication or presentation or pitching an idea or thoughts. Specifically, that with the WordSesh and the WooSesh, as you mentioned earlier, that probably you have hosted somewhere around 400 plus presentations and had a chance to work with the 335 plus speakers, right? So that's and you have been doing this for the last 8 to 12 years. So I think there's a lot of data there. Like you are very privileged to closely work with this almost 300 plus speakers and variety of different topics. All those speakers, some of them will be introverts, some of them will be extroverts, some of them will be technical, some of them have done probably tens and 50s of presentation, and it might be the first presentation for someone. So I think it's a very interesting data set that you had an experience working very closely with. And most importantly, I like your style of presenting these tips. When I was a speaker, the way you presented, give us the Google Doc with tips on how to set up your camera, how to set up the background, and a lot of great tips on how to basically be on the camera. So I love that, and it was super, super helpful to me. And I want to open up there and see what are some of the tips that you think will be helpful to someone who is, let's start with maybe someone who is like starting, haven't done that many talks before, starting maybe first or second. What do you think some of the tips for some of the new beginners?
Yeah, I would love to start there. I think that makes sense. I'm going to redefine that category a little bit, because I think there are listeners, hopefully they're still listening, who might otherwise think, well, I don't want to speak, so this isn't going to be a tip for me. I have good and bad news for you. The bad news is you're speaking even if you're not presenting at an event or on stage or virtually or otherwise. You're talking to, I would hope, your colleagues, your clients, your customers, your employers. There are hundreds of communication opportunities that you experience every single week. And therein is the good news, because every single one of those is an opportunity to stand out. And the better news is it doesn't take much to stand out and create a truly positive impression. And the more you care about having a positive impression, especially for outward facing things, right? Like when you're working with clients or you're trying to attract a new customer or anything like that, the better your success is going to be by any definition you choose for success. So I guess that right there is tip one, is if you spend even a little bit of time thinking about or being concerned about how you're communicating or how you come across to the person you're communicating with, you're going to stand out positively compared to everyone else that other person may be communicating with in the week. And then to that end, what are some things you can do to stand out positively? You mentioned that I've got tons of tips for how you present yourself in regards to your camera, your microphone, your lighting, your background, the rest of the environment when it's a video-based call. And I would love to get into those. The first thing that I have also related to that is just systemizing your approach to the work that you do. My the reason that you had such a great experience as a speaker at one of my events is because I've systemized the onboarding experience for speakers. I gathered all of the tips that I gave so often, and I put them in a Google Doc, and I recorded a 10-minute video. And I've got a handful of sort of email communication templates for onboarding speakers, because I know even seasoned veterans will benefit from a couple of tips here or there. So I systemize the approach. So I don't necessarily send the same emails to every speaker, but I have all of the stuff ready, so I approach it the same way every single time. And when I get ready to present myself, I literally have physical buttons on my desk that turn on my lights, get my camera ready, get my microphone ready. And if you're listening to this and are starting to feel overwhelmed, you don't need to go to this level of production. In fact, it works out best when you don't, funnily enough. But I've got all of the stuff. I've got it ready. I know that every meeting is going to have the same level of production quality. And one small tip, people care a lot more about the quality of the audio than anything else when you're communicating with them. If your audio is poor quality, it doesn't matter how good your video is or even how good your message is, people won't want to listen to it. So you should care most about the quality of your audio. And the good news on that is you don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on a microphone to get it. Even the free headphones with built-in mic that have come with, well, not anymore, but used to come with every iPhone that people bought and have been duplicated and copied by every other manufacturer. They do a surprisingly good job. Not perfect, but like how you wear them matters. Where like if you're wearing a wired microphone or headphones with an inline microphone, it's important that that cord is not brushing across your clothing. And so while it's typically poor advice to hunch over your desk, right, that's really terrible for your posture, so don't do it. Except maybe when you're talking, because that also brings you in close to the microphone or into the camera, which helps you fill more of the frame. But critically, in this tip, keeps the microphone away from your clothing and away from your chin or your neck or your beard if you happen to be wearing facial hair, and also away from your hands so you're not bumping it, and will give you some pretty clear audio. That's paramount.
Love it. All right, so let's ask some questions on the audio, because I have experienced the same thing too. Like when I was trying to level up my setup here, I signed up for an online course which basically helps you to set up more like a studio class, the whole work setup. And one of the things that they brought it up in that, like audio, they emphasized the same thing, like microphone and audio is super important. So there are like the one that I'm using right now, it's like $59. The headphone does pretty good job with the noise cancellations and all of that. And most importantly, the mic, it doesn't basically touch anything else. I mean, I don't have a beard, but there are like wireless too, where you can just put it on the desk, and then not a wireless, but basically it's more like hands-free and head-free. You just put it on the desk and then you can talk to them. So is there any specific types of like mic that you usually use or suggest or recommend that works in a different setup?
Depends on budget, right? I mentioned wired headphone microphones work great and are cheap as free, or $10 or $15. Your headset mic is brilliant. I forgot to mention that, but I had a run-on tip there. That one's great. The most important thing that you can do is keeping your mic in a consistent distance from your mouth. So yours is about a hand's width away from your mouth. Mine is as well. Mine's off camera. I'll bring it up here. It's just out of frame, but it is about a hand's width away from my mouth, a little bit lower. So I'm talking above it. That helps for plosives like P and T letter words, because I'm not breathing into the microphone, same as you. Yours is just off to the side of your mouth. It's picking up all of the audio and not any of the air movement directly into the microphone. That helps a ton. More important than the specific type of microphone, I guess let me finish. Mine is the Rode Podcaster, and it's it might be about $300 now or $200 now, and it's in a shock mount, which is like another $100, and then on a boom arm, which is another $100, and all of that is to keep it close to me, but vibration free from the desk that it's mounted to. And then you can get mics that are multiple hundreds of dollars more with inline audio processing to make them as great as possible. I also have like another $100 of software running on my computer at all times to serve as a noise gate to make sure that anything below a certain threshold isn't picked up, like me typing, and a compressor. So when I get really excited and start talking animatedly and loud, it keeps the volume generally in the same range. So I'm not blowing out anybody's eardrums.
Okay.
You don't need to worry about, like, more important than what hardware and software you're running is the environment in which you're recording. So I already mentioned keeping it, close to your face, as close as you can get it to your mouth to maximize it hearing you versus the room around you. But also making sure you're in a controlled environment insofar as possible. So right now I'm in a rather soundproof room. I'm here alone. There's no other background noise for my mic to get. The room is also carpeted, which helps absorb my reflective noise. And routinely, like if I'm recording a course or something where my audio really, really matters, I'll bring lots of soft things and put them on my desk, blankets, towels, etc. Because otherwise, my environment is not actually that great. I've got a hard desk, I've got hard monitors surrounding me, and my voice is bouncing off of those. And if I were trying to do a really controlled thing, you'll hear my voice reflecting back, and those soft things absorb the noise so that it just comes across much cleaner and much warmer, welcoming.
Love it. What are the other tips on setup or presentation?
Well, I think we covered the gamut in audio, and I think I've done a pretty good job of stressing audio is most important. For video, you are the most important thing in your video. So try to not have a distracting background, but that doesn't mean don't have avoid a busy background. Mine right now is it's a charcoal gray, almost black paint. So it looks like I'm just presenting from the void. That's cool. You've got a bookshelf behind you. I think if it were me, I would move the bookshelf either a bit to the left or a bit to the right, so it takes up some of that empty space. But as it is, it's fine, right? Like no one else who's not me thinking critically would even give it a second thought. You're in an office, you've got a bookshelf behind you. Perfect. Broadcasting from your living room, as so many people were forced to do early into the pandemic, or still otherwise, also totally fine. I would just avoid having clutter or trash or dirty dishes, right? Like if your kitchen is behind you, right? Like don't have anything back there that you'd be embarrassed by. I used to have a background that had tons, like I'm a visual designer or was in a previous life. And so I would collect interesting designs and hang them up. I called it my wall of inspiration. So it was mixed of things I designed that I was really happy with and things that I ripped out of magazines, or I had a restaurant menu hanging up that I really loved once. I'm like, can I just take this home with me? Thanks. And I tacked that up. It was as busy as you could get, but it was great. Like it provided lots of visual interest. So the most important thing is you. So make sure that you're framed head and shoulders in a way that maximizes your presentation. And then for the stuff that's behind you, try as best as you can to make it complementary. It doesn't take a lot to just like adjust your computer one way or the other a few degrees to radically alter the room behind you. Like if you, in your case, right, like you don't even have to necessarily move that bookshelf to get it more over your left shoulder or your right shoulder. You could just slide along your desk slightly and rotate your camera and monitor with you, and boom, that background is now completely different, and you didn't have to unload the bookshelf, physically move the shelf, reload the shelf. So it's easy to make tiny alterations that have a big impact on what you're doing. And also just like physically moving your camera or yourself relative to the camera to make you bigger or smaller in the frame goes a long way.
I love it. And I remember the tips that you shared in a Google Doc. One thing you mentioned about putting like some kind of or like a wallpaper or like a something in the background. So if you have a lot of clutters in the back, you don't need to basically worry about building a whole clean wall. You can just put like some kind of like a curtain or a wallpaper that goes and that covers, right? So tell us a little bit more about that. Like I remember that you mentioned that.
Yeah. In fact, the video you mentioned, I was in the process of remodeling the space that I'm in currently. So when I recorded it out of necessity, I just had like bare studs behind me, or I might have even been still in the demo phase. So like I had a very uninspiring, ugly background. And all I did was hang up a black curtain, which I happen to have on hand already from being a professional photographer for a bunch of years. It was a 10 by 20 sheet. And I think I got it for, and I was still in college, so I couldn't have spent even $100. I probably spent $40 or $50 on it. But you, depending on where you live, probably already have curtains that you could pull from, or a nice empty blanket that you could pull from, and get like a couple of coat racks if you didn't want to spend any money, right? You just hang up a sheet behind you, or if you are happy spending money, right? There are literal photography backdrop sets that you can buy as kits from B&H Photo, or Amazon, of course, now is the everything store, right? For cheap is free, I would imagine, $40 or less. Privacy screens are also super popular that people have sometimes if they're in a studio apartment to like, I go and change behind my privacy screen as a common thing in movies, right? The critical thing about those is bring them close enough to you that they fill the entire frame, but not so close that you run the risk of hitting them or maybe throwing a shadow on them. So maybe just like a foot behind you, and then you're maybe a foot or two from your camera. So the entire space is about 3 feet deep. That way you can afford to buy something that's really nice, but not very big. And it completely blocks out what's behind you and gives you a really nice presentation layer.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And especially those curtains and the wallpaper, I noticed that they are not that expensive, you know, probably what you mentioned, like $40, $50 or maybe under $100, you can get something like that. Even if you want to just keep it temporary or you want to just keep it permanent. But I think that was a lot of us, we don't think about it like, okay, that's possible. A way to basically hide all the clutter, and you don't need to put anything like bookshelf or anything. Just put it like a nice the plain background, which basically hides the rest of the things, and that itself will be very sufficient for a great presentation.
Bingo. Yeah. And when you're not using them, they collapse up nice and small, and they can just go in your closet or just standing next to your desk, and they're out of the way. And then when you need them, even in a moment's notice, right? A client's like, hey, do you have 10 minutes? And you're like, yeah, I'll join you in 1 minute. And you just pop out, you move the background behind you, and then you say, yeah, let's go for it. Yeah. And it looks like you've got a professional studio at all times.
Yeah.
Okay guys, so if you'd like to check out how Multicollab works and how Multicollab can solve your problems or improve your content publishing workflow, you can go to our website and click on the Try Hands-on Demo link in the menu section to access a self-hosted WordPress installation where you can test all the features from Multicollab, or you can also, if you prefer, watch a demo video as well.
Oh, that's great. So we talked about audio, we talked about visuals, video, and how to make our environment a little bit more presentable. Any other tips or your observation from the speakers, like, these 300 plus speakers that presented, if you noticed any particular traits that makes them, a great speaker?
I do, yes. And that's probably the most important part to spend our time. I want to spend 10 more seconds on visual presentation. Lighting is also super important for the visual layer. And you don't have to go out and spend. I have a couple of really nice lights. They're Elgato key lights, and I think they're maybe $200 each. And I picked these specifically because I can turn them on and off at the press of a button on my computer.
Oh, wow.
So I'm just ready to go immediately. You can have, before I had these, I literally just had bare bulb lights and poster board to bounce them off of. The most important thing is having the biggest possible light available to you, because that creates the most uniform, softest shadows. And that can just be a big window right behind your, in front of you, behind your desk. If you're always, on camera at the same time of day when there's plenty of light coming in,
Right.
that light can bounce off the ceiling above you and then flood you quite nicely with light. If you need more control, get a couple of, like, even just floor lamps that you don't point directly at you, but point at the wall or the ceiling away from you, and then the reflective light hits you. It goes such a long way to have more light than you think is necessary. But all of these amazing tips on the lighting and the camera and the background and the audio are secondary to the most important thing, which is thinking about your audience and what they need. And so in terms of presenting at a conference, right, or some kind of event or a webinar, the audience are the attendees. But in terms of like talking to your colleagues or talking to your clients, right, they're the audience. And so what is it that they need out of this conversation you're about to have with them? I think of all presentations and all meetings as just a conversation that's happening. And there's a goal for that. And so if you can figure out what that goal is before the conversation happens, the conversation, you get to the point much more quickly. You can make the point much better. You can have a much better outcome, right? So like, what's the goal for them? And your goal should be helping them reach that goal, right? So for a client, let's pretend they're building a new website. Their goal is ostensibly to get more customers or get customers to spend more money, or for the customers to find the information that they need more easily. And so you're helping them do that. And so one thing to keep in mind as you're helping them do that is their opinion isn't necessarily the most important opinion. And so you can kindly tell them, like, I know you want these colors, or you want to use this photo, or you want to build the page in this way. But you also told me that your goal is for your customers to do X, Y, or Z. I don't know that what we're talking about now is actually going to help your customers do X, Y, or Z. So you can very politely tell them, right, if you're like, you're wrong, without saying you're wrong, because you can say like, this is a really good feedback. Do you think any of this is going to make a big impact on this previously stated goal? And they'll say, oh, no, you're right. Or I think it will because of this reason. And then you get some additional perspective. You're like, oh, okay, good. Right? If your goal is helping them achieve their goal, you are both going to have a better conversation than if you're only thinking about what you need or the questions that they're asking. It took me a long time to realize that that was what was setting me apart from my colleagues, from my competitors. Is just like, oh, yeah. I did spend some time focused on like, let me just answer your questions and solve the problem you're presenting me. And so many times that was the wrong problem to solve, right? Clients have spent some time thinking about like, this is the problem I have. And here's what I think the solution is based on my limited perspective or experience with the problem. And especially when it came to web design and development, it was the wrong thing. I'm like, that is a good solution based on your limited understanding. But actually, if we step out bigger and we think about, here's what's in your customer's head when they hit the website, or here's how this works. This is actually what we need to build. Henry Ford is famously quoted for saying, if I'd given the customer what they wanted, what they said they wanted, I would have been selling a faster horse.
Yeah.
And instead he produced an automobile, completely different class of product, and it solved an entirely new set of problems that people hadn't considered, and birthed so many, like, drive-through restaurants would never have existed if we were still primarily traveling by horse, because they're unneeded. Gas stations wouldn't need to, right? Like all these knockdown effects of problems. In my newsletter recently, I featured a talk, one of my favorite talks I've hosted, by Chrissy Vandenoord. And the title, it was for WooSesh. And so it was about WooCommerce, and it was about bringing 3D visualization into product customizations. So her client was a furniture manufacturer where people can customize the furniture that they're ordering, and they wanted a tool so the customers could visually see the selections they were making on the furniture that they were customizing. And she delivered that, and it was great, but it had an outsized return of positive impact on the business because it reduced customer service inquiries because the client knew exactly what they were buying. It reduced returns because, again, they could know what they were getting ahead of time. It reduced so many other burdens in the business and increased the amount of sales they were getting because, again, the customers knew exactly what they were getting into as they customized the stuff. And so many different parts of the business changed. But that also happened because Chrissy and her team asked questions beyond how should this particular plugin work in your business? Like, tell me more about your business needs. And so she, again, thought about what the person on the other end of the conversation needed and then tailored the conversation to meet those needs. That if you listen to no other tips that I have to say on this podcast, crafting your message around the recipient's needs is the most important thing that you can be doing.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you're actually doing.
Yeah. No, I think it's very impactful. And I'll add a couple of things on that, Brian, that what I noticed that most of the time, whether it's presenting or just trying to share our idea or thoughts with someone, a lot of times we feel like, I need to actually package my idea in a more like entertaining or more inspiring, and we try to kind of like pay a lot of attention to be a little bit more clever, and we forget that our thoughts and the message should be first clear. So if it's not clear, it doesn't matter how clever it sounds, it will not actually help solving the problem. And I have seen that so many different times that someone will be a great speaker, they will use the great analogies, but they will not answer the question that I'm asking, or they are not actually even addressing the problem that I'm sharing with. It doesn't matter how awesome their presentation is, but if it is not aligned or related to my problem and my question, then I will feel like, I just wasted my time, like somebody wasted my time, and my time is important. So yeah, I think that's one thing about being more clear than clever in communicating. That was the one piece of advice that stuck to me, and always I try to refine my message. Like, does it sound clever or is it clear? I always pick the clear over the clever message.
Yeah, that's such a perfect point. And often it can be clear and clever, which makes it memorable.
Yeah.
But you're right. Frequently, it's a trade-off of like, this is going to be super clever. And then the message doesn't land in the way it's supposed to. And it's a bummer. Yeah. I would say anytime you're putting together a presentation, lean into the areas of complexity. Like, so many presenters try to avoid that, and they give like a surface level presentation on a thing. And then it misses because it's too basic. It's too stripped down. I can't tell you the number of times I went to a presentation and it was like an introduction on the concept of whatever the presenter was doing. I'm like, well, I already knew that. That's why I came to hear you speak. Like, I could have gotten that in the paragraph of boilerplate about your talk or about the product that you're showing off. I want you to talk to me about like the problem areas. And so when I'm guiding presenters for my conferences, I frequently try to guide them towards case studies, because those are, I find, to be the most perfect wayfinding, like, learning tool, because it shows you not only here's a problem that's very well articulated and the solution to that problem, but also along the way, here are the other things we considered and what went poorly, and we tried this and it broke, and we tried this and it was awful, and we tried this and it didn't work this way. And then finally we arrived here. Because sometimes those things that worked poorly in your case study are actually the correct solution for somebody else, because they have different constraints. They're like, oh, yeah, we don't have that. That actually works really well for us. Or if they have zero exposure to the thing, you've just saved them tons of headaches because they're not going to make all of the same mistakes as you. They can skip right past that and get right to the solution and know why it's a solution, so they can defend it to whoever is the stakeholder that they're trying to convince about the solution. So yeah. Clarity over cleverness wins every time. Case studies are a really great way to get clear on what the problem is and what the solution is. And also lacing what you have to say with specific actionable tips, like we've done throughout this podcast episode, is far more useful than just, let me tell you about my experience as a presenter or as a whatever.
Yeah.
Like, here, do this thing specifically, and here's why.
Yeah. So let me put something on the screen real quick. Those who are listening to this, I'm sharing a screen here, and it is an article that I published few months ago, which is on just how to be an effective communicator. And especially when Brian was mentioning about the presenting the solution. So this is kind of like one structure. Like I have noticed that when I have to present something, if I have a clear structure in my mind, I can actually present my idea really more effectively and comfortably. But most importantly, it also gives a structure to the people who are listening to that. They also actually consume the information in very, very specific format. And that is both good for both, so that I don't forget what I need to say, because I know exactly, okay, in this block, this is what are the examples I'm going to share. So I use this T-shaped structure, where whatever the topic is, I put it in the center. And then on my left, I would put like, what are the importance of like why it matters to learn, which you started in the beginning, like you shared the importance of like why it is important to be a good communicator. You mentioned some of the examples of that. And then we talked about the obstacles, like what are some of the obstacles, like even knowing that this topic is important, why some of us struggle in this topic. So you kind of like mentioned a little bit about that too. And then it comes to the solution, like, all right, now what is the solution? So this is one structure that I try to organize my content, and mostly I start with the importance. Then I start on the obstacle, and then I spend, let's say, 10% time here, 10% on obstacle, and 80% on the solution.
Yes, that I saw that article when it came out, actually, and completely forgot it was yours. That needs to go in the show notes for sure, because it is it encapsulates everything that I've just been saying beautifully.
Yeah. Thanks. No, we'll put that. And I also want to include the Google Doc that you shared with me to prepare my talk for the WordSesh. If you have updated version of that, I would love to get a link for that, and I'll put in the show notes. And most importantly, I also want to see what new things that you have put there, and I can learn from it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that. For all of you dear listeners, this is usually an exclusive thing that only people who speak at my events get to see. I think this will be the first time I'm sharing it with anyone who isn't directly speaking in something that I'm helping produce. So it's very special in that regard. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I think that like the whole talk, like preparing for the talk, that document, I still have it bookmarked on my browser, and I refer it to. I also share it with my leadership team when they have to present somewhere. I was like, hey, read this. There are a lot of great tips there, but I'm sure you will have updated one and a little bit more information in that. So yeah, send me the new link, and I really appreciate if to giving us a permission to put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I should actually, in hindsight, make a more scrubbed down public version of this, because as we've been talking about here, it's important in broader context than just you're giving a presentation at an event. As we've talked before, like some of the most profound opportunities I've had have even just come from being present at an event. Often it works out really well to be a speaker because it lends credibility and authority. And I would encourage anyone who's listening to attempt public speaking, especially if it's scary, but even if it's not, because it creates more momentum behind anything else you want to say to anyone. When you say, oh yeah, I spoke at this event about blah, 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 blah. Or when you're at the event, yeah, I'm speaking on this topic. But the conversations that I have with individuals, like applying the same framework of thinking what it is that they need and what their goals are and how I can help them reach them, like opportunities manifest because of conversations like that. And I can point to multiple tens of thousands of dollars that have come into my business because of conversations that I wasn't even expecting to have with people that I met through events. It's amazing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I'm an introvert, and I think, talked about that earlier too, that even like as an introvert, I struggle a lot, to gather the courage to talk to the events, whether it's virtual or the physical. But what you mentioned, that it's very true. Like, there are so many benefits and the reasons that we should be doing it. And the most important thing is it's actually sounds very like a terrible or horrible idea in your brain too. And I mean, I know that I think there was a study about that very large percentage of people have the anxiety and the the stress with the public speaking, and there's some of them put actually it about death, so the fear of public speaking is about death and a lot of other horrible things. But with the right practice and with right tips, I think it's not that difficult. And sometimes, like, we try to compare that with like a popular celebrity or someone who is, let's say, really good, like a stand-up comedian, and you're like, oh, I want to match my performance to that level. Because like that's where the anxiety kicks in. If you just like, hey, I have a great content, I have the great experience in this topic, knowledge in this topic, I just need to find the most effective way to present my idea, in my own, with my personality and style. I don't need to actually change my style and personality. What I just need to do is clear structure to present that idea.
Yes, that's exactly right. I have 2 well-formed tips to that end.
All right, let's go ahead.
First, for people who are afraid of speaking, I told my 5th grader this just recently. He had to give a presentation in front of more than 100 people, and he's just totally terrified of the idea.
Yeah.
And I said, quite simply, everybody in the audience wants you to succeed. And they don't care if you make a mistake. And they don't know what you had prepared to say. Only you know what you were going to say. And if you say it differently, it's fine. In fact, I think this is also in the video that we'll be sharing in the notes. So nobody knows what you're going to say. Nobody cares how you were going to say it in the first place. So it's okay if it comes out differently. And they all want to see you succeed. So it's very encouraging and very forgiving of mistakes. So don't even worry about making mistakes. And then
one thing I want to add more into that, Brian, on the same point, the one thing I also tell myself and others, that when I'm presenting on a topic, and if there is an audience who's there giving their time to listen to that topic, they're not expert in that topic, right? So the knowledge, because if there is an expert in that topic, that person would not be sitting in the audience, right? The person is over there. So what I tell myself is like, I know much more than these people, otherwise they would not be sitting in the audience. So I should not be afraid, because I have more knowledge and more actually experience in this topic. That's why I'm here, and they are there to learn, not to criticize me, because if they already know more than me, they will not be in the audience. They'll be somewhere else.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That is almost my second tip here. Okay. From a different perspective. The second tip is for people who are like, I don't think I'm the right person to give this presentation. I'm not an authority on this. There are so many people who are more experienced, more knowledgeable, who could do this better than me. You are correct. That is 100% true. There are so many people who could do it better than you. But guess what? They're not available, and they're not choosing to use their time to do it. And you, as you just said, already have some level of experience with this, absolutely more experience than the people who are in the audience. So you are de facto the right person to give a talk on whatever topic it is that you're thinking of. You don't have to be the expert. You can't be the most knowledgeable expert in any topic. There's always going to be somebody who knows something more than you. So tip 1, the audience is there to encourage you, and they want you to succeed. And tip 2, you are not the best possible person to give the talk, but you are the right person to give the talk. So be encouraged by both of those, and don't be concerned or worried.
Yeah, those are great tips, Brian. I love that. I think those are probably should be, if someone is having a fear or anxiety related to public speaking or speaking in general, I think, yeah, those two things, you should write it down and put it as a quote and read it. That will inspire.
Yeah. A third one, it's okay to say, I don't know. You can say that on stage in front of hundreds of people. If someone asks you a question, or you get to a point in the talk where you don't have I want to pause right now and tell you all, I don't know much beyond this point, but I am willing to find out. That speaks volumes. That tip is particularly useful when you're talking to a client and you're like, oh no, they asked me a question I don't know the answer to. Right. Just tell them, hey, I don't know that right now, but I'll look it up after this call is over. I'll get back to you. That will impress them more than you would believe.
Yeah. No, I love that. All right, Brian. So I want to spend a little bit of time on your next WordSesh event that's coming up in a few months. But as far as the tips on this topic, those are super, super helpful. And any additional resources that you have, let's say the Google Doc or anywhere else you have written or spoken about how to be a great presenter or effective speaker, we would love to include them in the show notes. And now let's talk a little bit about the WordSesh that's coming up in 2 months. So what's the format of that? Anything that you can share about it? I'll also put it on the screen so those who are curious can see.
Yeah,
what we are looking
wonderful. I'll start narrating while that's loading. So WordSesh is a virtual conference for WordPress professionals. That is, people who choose WordPress to build websites. Some people are developers and some people are not. And WordPress is a great tool across the board, right? On the website currently, if you're looking anytime in the next few weeks or month, you're going to see a selection of past presenters and a look at previous schedules to see the caliber of people that we recruit and the kinds of talks that we're hosting. So I like to reach to like the most knowledgeable people that I know of across the world. And I encourage people to pitch themselves to me or pitch people to me that I might not have seen, because I have hosted many talks from people that I didn't personally know of before I got to host them at WordSesh. I haven't confirmed enough speakers just yet. That's happening this week and next week for me to be able to tease any. But I can tell you in general, we bring in agency owners or in-house team members who are building some really impressive stuff. We've hosted the team that rebuilt whitehouse.gov, who had to do it in a span of about 6 weeks. And for anyone outside the US, that's a very high-profile website when we get a new president of the United States, and they have a very small window in which to successfully build and deploy it. And so I had the privilege of hosting the most recent team who got to do that. And I've hosted folks who have worked on high-profile websites that we can't talk about. And I've hosted folks who've worked on really small websites that you wouldn't even have heard of, even if they could talk about them, but work with such passion and deliver such incredible solutions that it's sometimes more impressive than these great big show-stopping names that we get to tease. WordSesh in particular, it still hits every time zone, but it's not a 24-hour continuous broadcast anymore, because that is a lot. So instead, I've settled on 3 separate broadcasts that are timed well for Europe and Africa, Asia and Pacific, and then the Americas and Greenland. The hemisphere that we're in, so that no matter where you are in the world, there's going to be a live broadcast that should accommodate your time zone. And even if there isn't, or you're busy on the day that we're live, good news, because everything's recorded and then available on demand after the live broadcast has ended, so you can fit it into your schedule. I'm a huge proponent for live events because they're a forcing function. Most of us want to learn things aspirationally, like, oh yeah, I'd love to know how to do that. I'm going to get a course on that, and I'm going to learn how to do this thing. And we'll even spend thousands of dollars to that end, and then not learn the thing because there's no other forcing function for us. So I find live events to be really great for that. So May 7, 8, and 9 for 2024 is when the broadcast is going to be. And I'll have more info on that as we get into April here. And if you're interested in attending, it's free to register and attend. Right now, you can just put your name into a form and I'll email you once we've got more details and once registration has opened proper. It's a blast. I love doing it.
Oh, that's great. And being a lifelong learner and 1% better every day, those are one of the two values of my life. And everything that you produce, with a WP session or a WooSesh or WordSesh, it's all for the education, so there is tons of content. And as you mentioned, that it is free for the attendees, and you can learn a lot in 24 hours that probably will take 24 months of knowledge. And a lot of other speakers here, they have 10, 15, 20 years of experience in their field. So yeah, there is a lot of knowledge there. And especially if you are into WordPress or digital business like marketing, design, development, or running an agency or working in an agency, I think there are a lot of, it's not just the technical, but I think there are a lot of non-technical sessions that will also be very, very important and helpful. So yeah, I would I've been speaker. I have also been attendees in several of the past events. So I would also highly recommend if you are also passionate about learning and growing like me.
Yeah, that is maybe the best testimony, better than I could have asked for. That was amazing. And yeah, I can't believe I completely forgot that while it's for people who use WordPress, it's not, or who build sites with WordPress, it's not exclusively WordPress content, because one thing I've discovered in my 11 years of doing this is we need exposure outside of the WordPress bubble. And so I'll recruit speakers who talk about the larger marketing, client relationship management, etc. Right? Just good business practices that everybody needs to know, even if you're not using WordPress. So,
and that's a hard part, because you can find tons of WordPress content, that like how to do this in WordPress. You probably find a bunch of different help, but how to fire a person in an agency, or how to actually get better at whatever your role is, those are the things like soft skills. Those are very hard to find the answers for. And those are the questions that you can't Google it. You have to actually, you have to have someone to help you with that.
A perfect talk to encapsulate that. Last year, I hosted how to rescue a disgruntled client, right? So like, how do you bring a client back who's upset or who has come to you upset with their previous team? Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, these are gonna be great. We're gonna be rock stars for them. And it turns out like, no, the problem is the client. It's not the previous team that they were working with. They fired the previous team because the previous team wouldn't bend the knee to their absurd requests. And they're going to make those same absurd requests to you. So how do you educate and inform them and make them a good client? And there's like, how do you even begin to articulate that question to find the right answer? And here I happen to just have that in the library now.
Yeah, like we did the math, right? How many 400 plus different topics that people can learn from in the last 8 years of the WordSesh.
Yeah.
Ryan, it was a blast. Thank you for sharing and being so generous with your time and sharing all the tips on how to be a great speaker, or just not even great, but just how to be an effective speaker, because that's something what I personally care about. And I think you and I, we talked a lot about it, and specifically coming in from you with all this vast experience, it's very, very valuable. I really appreciate your time today and sharing all the tips.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share the tips. So thanks for thinking of me.
Absolutely.
Okay guys, so thank you so much for watching. Now if you are interested and would like to try this out for yourself, we offer a free trial of our Pro plan where you can test all the Multicollab features. So for this, all you have to do is click on the link in the description below, and this will bring you to this page. And from here, simply click on either of those two buttons here. Now simply enter your details, and that's it. You are ready to enjoy the Pro version of Multicollab. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.